Why am I a feminist and what message do I hope to send? I am a feminist because I believe there is inequalities in the world. Gender inequalities and oppression exists. I came to this conclusion after taking a course on gender inequality. I understand that some people might not realize that there is gender inequality in our world. I lived through a fair amount of pretty clear gender inequality and still thought the world was very equal. So I kind of understand being in that place. However, after realizing how power had been abused in my childhood regarding some really sketchy things I ended up going through that occasionally I talk about, but I don't want to today. The instances around my abortion, and I know that's a really sensitive topic, and if you're anti-abortion, I would just, until you understand, I wouldn't recommend you going in on that topic. Some of the issues that, like, just so many issues I was facing going to this class and realizing, like, this is part of a larger structure that many of us don't look at, many of us don't see and understand. And when I realized that those inequalities are there and that gender relations are horrible in our country, I realized I wanted to fight for equality. And a lot of people say, why don't you call yourself an egalitarian rather than a feminist? The reason I don't do that is because I learned so much from feminist history, and I am a continuation of that feminist history. What I mean by that is when you study feminist history, you see the progress we have made, and we have made progress, but we're not to full equality. And a lot of people want to believe we're in a like post-feminist era, but that's not the reality. Feminists are the ones who have been fighting this. Egalitarians aren't out there, in rallies trying to fight for women's rights. They just say, oh, I believe people should be equal, but they may or may not recognize the existing inequalities. And if you ignore the existing inequalities and just say, well, I believe in equality, that really doesn't do anything for anyone. It just doesn't. So that's why I'm a feminist, is I see the inequalities that are existing and I'm taking an active stand, understanding our history, learning from feminist theorists, and that's why I'm a feminist, is because I believe we can do better. I believe that we don't have to have gender relations in the way they are today. I believe that women can be empowered and take care of themselves and be more independent. I believe we can stop shoving men into these boxes where they have to be tough and strong and they have to, do all of these things to be a manly man, and otherwise we're gonna mock them and push them into a role that is damaging to people. It doesn't allow people to be emotionally vulnerable with each other. It doesn't allow people to have healthy relationships, and it's really sad. I just want the world to be a better place. And so part of that is fighting sexism, sexist oppression, and oppression as a whole. That includes homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and so many other things, racism, xenophobia, and the list goes on, but that's why I'm a feminist. So Exactly May says, do you have body dysphoria? I think I read somewhere that you were wanting to reduce your breast size. Yes, on September 1st, I have a gender confirming breast reduction. I will be going to someone who specializes, a surgeon who specializes in trans healthcare. And he has worked with non-binary people before that also wanted the exact same procedure. So content warning, I'm going to talk a little bit about some medical things so I can talk, and gender dysphoria as well, body dysphoria as well. So the very basics of my body dysphoria is I know I have dysphoria around my breasts. That is the most, how do I explain this? That is the most stable body part of mine that gives me gender dysphoria. I'm trying to differentiate that a little bit from, like, there are certain things that I do, certain movements that I consider kind of related to body dysphoria, but it's more of a gender performance sort of thing. So I want to differentiate a little bit between those two. But my breasts are something that have been consistently dysphoric for me. And those are one of the things that helped me really understand that, yeah, I'm definitely non-binary. I know there's a lot of internalized transphobia, and I struggle with that sometimes, and I feel so bad for people who are going through internalized transphobia that don't have any body dysphoria, because unfortunately, because of our discourse, that seems like a thing that people will validate a lot, and that makes me sad, because people who don't have body dysphoria are totally valid in their gender identities, and I don't want them to struggle thinking that maybe they're a trender or whatever because of their own internalized transphobia. So if you're one of those people, I hear you, you're valid, and I'm so sorry that our society treats trans people this way. But I have specifically specifically body dysphoria around my breasts, and what I'm doing to relieve that is I am getting a reduction. And so I'm gonna be getting the largest reduction possible while keeping my, and this is where the content warning for some medical stuff comes up. I will be getting my reduction as much as possible without cutting the nerves between my nerves to my nipples. So the reason that you don't want to cut the nerves to your nipples, or you would try to preserve those, is otherwise you lose functionality of your nipples, which I don't need. I'm not going to be breastfeeding or anything like that. I don't want children. I've never wanted children, and I promise you, I will never want children. But it's also a feeling sort of thing. You can lose the feeling in your nipples. You'll lose the feeling in your nipples if you cut that, you sever that, those nerves. And I want to maintain that if possible, but I'll be honest that it's not a higher priority than relieving my gender dysphoria. So if I get to the point that I need to, so this is something we've talked about, and I talked to the doctor a bit about this. I said, hey, like, if I come out of this procedure and my breasts aren't small enough and I'm still dysphoric, what would you recommend at that point? And he said that there's a very non-invasive liposuction he could do a few months after the surgery that would flatten them even more and preserve the nerves, even though shocking them briefly for maybe, I think he said 6 to 12 months, and then the feeling might come back. I think that's what he said. I might have the timing a little off there, but I'm like 90% sure. And then he said if that still isn't enough, we could absolutely do a full-on top surgery. And he's worked with non-binary people before, worked with them on their happiness around their procedure. So I'm really excited. I'm really incredibly grateful that we have healthcare that is understanding and accepting of non-binary people, because I was really worried that I would go in and people would expect me to get a top surgery and nothing else, when my gender is a gender, yes, but that doesn't mean having a flat chest. That doesn't necessarily mean that. My most comfortable place is when I look androgynous. So I want my breasts to be small enough that I can appear androgynous and be in that area where people aren't necessarily sure. That is what makes me comfortable. And then on top of that, though, I do prefer to have a gender fluid or an openness to a gender fluid presentation, where some days I can dress very feminine and some days I can dress masculine, but my home place really is in that androgyny. So I hope that helps explain a little bit more on my experience around that. Everyone's gonna be a little different, and I think it's incredible that we have healthcare at this point, that we are partying in here. Healthcare at this point that can accommodate for all of those differences in people. Darling Socks asked a question. Have you ever been to Pride? What are they like? Is it worth going to for someone really new to the community? Oh boy. So my first Pride was really good. And also kind of cringe on part of my own. So welcome in, Krista. We're glad to have you here. So Darling Socks, what I would say is I really benefited from my Pride. Different Prides in different areas are obviously going to be different. Fort Wayne, Indiana is where I attended my first Pride. I loved it. I think that Pride brings you into the LGBTQIA culture. Maybe not every aspect of it, but more aspects than you get to see in your day-to-day life, especially if you're in a conservative area. And I think that being around people that are in that community can be really powerful and helpful. So that would be my thoughts around whether or not to attend that. I hope that's helpful to you, but I absolutely recommend it. And yeah, I will say, like, I definitely have my complaints about Pride, like definitely not non-binary friendly. The last time I went to one, no one was asking my pronouns, even though I had like so much trans merch on me, and they were still misgendering me like crazy, or like wild, excuse me. But at the end of the day, like, as Utah said, still more inclusive, still an area that you can go and learn a lot. And we can improve that area too by being a part of it and pushing our community to be more inclusive. So I would say, yeah, I recommend it. I definitely recommend it. Yeah, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to learn some, Miranda. Welcome in. Glad to have you here.